Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 3. Now let's start the fanfic. Temari figured this was the best time to start looking into the blonde puzzle that was Naruto Uzumaki. She had read his file back in Suna when she was told who she was to marry. The files they did have came from the Shared Information Act that the previous alliance had that would give the basic information on active ninja that weren't Anbu. It was a way to prevent villages that were friendly with each other to prevent complications while on mission or met up in the field. Also, Suna had just before the invasion had made up files on all active ninja they could find. The Suna intelligence section had stopped every other mission for the planned invasion of Konoha. Given the failure of that invasion, Temari had a good guess that many people lost their jobs if not their lives for failure to gain the proper intelligence for just how strong this village was. At any rate, she had memorized his records, but some of it didn't make any sense as she had gotten to know Naruto. He was an orphan from a family name that had no record to it. Uzumaki just didn't seem to exist in any records that her people could find, and there had never been an Uzumaki clan at any point that she could find. But to gain entrance into the academy you needed to be sponsored, usually by a guardian or parent. But Naruto's had been signed by the third Hokage himself, which was very odd. Even the third had emancipated Naruto at a young age, taking him out of the orphanage and even gave him an apartment. There was obviously something going on, it was nagging at her lately. Naruto's grade showed him the last in his class, and she had to admit that his book smarts weren't all that great. His taijutsu was basic, but he improvised a lot in his fights while disregarding his own safety, like injuries didn't matter to him. His ninjutsu, however, was very impressive as he had learned a move of the fourths in a month. He was also making good progress with his wind manipulation as well. There were also times he had great insight into things, so his grade didn't make much sense to her. There were so many things that didn't make sense, so she needed to start piecing things together. That was to start talking to those that knew Naruto the most. The ramen stand people seemed nice and apparently knew him very well, but right now she was heading for the academy. Hopefully she could find this Iruka that Naruto had talked about. She had seen a picture that the young man had of himself with strange goggles on his head with a man with a scar on his face, both smiling. Know where the man was and what he looked like. She had an idea it wouldn't be a problem to find him. Thankfully, Naruto had given her a very good tour of the village in her time here, both in the Chunin exams and her living here. Temari had started to know the village fairly well. She walked her way to where the academy was and remembered Naruto showing her the building. To her it wasn't all that impressive, a few stories, and looked like it could hold somewhere around 5 to 8 classes. She also remembered this as the place where they had met up for the Chunin exams with that written test that scared freak made them take. She still couldn't believe all that hard work in that test was for nothing. Temari then smiled as she remembered the end of that test, with Naruto slamming his hand onto the desk and voicing his claim of not giving up. At the time she didn't think much of it, but looking back she had to admit that Naruto wasn't going to let anyone or anything stand in his way of being Hokage. When she got inside, there was a helpful lady at the front desk that told her where to find the teacher by the name of Iruka. Temari signed in and made her way to where the classroom was. She wasn't sure if the class was in session or not, and if it was she would have to wait for a break to talk to him. Fortunately, when she got to the room, the door was open. She looked inside the empty class with only a man writing on papers, most likely grading them. She could see kids playing outside the window in the back of the building and guessed she had good timing. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Iruka," Temari asked as she entered the room. Iruka looked up to the blonde girl, a little confused at first seeing the Leaf Village symbol around her neck. He didn't remember who she was at first, but the fan on her back made him kick in his memory. He had seen the sand team only a couple of times and never up close, but that fan was something that stuck out in memory. Ah, you wouldn't happen to be Temari, would you? Uruka asked in a friendly manner. Temari nodded. Yes, I am, and I take it that you are Uruka. It was more a statement than question, but Uruka nodded anyway as he stood up to greet her. She had heard all about the whole arranged marriage with Naruto and he felt for the boy. He had been so busy the past couple of weeks he kept missing Naruto at the ramen stand. So what can I do for you? He asked her. Temari wasn't sure what to say at first. She had thought about several things to talk about but decided to lead up to the really important questions she wanted to ask. Naruto has talked a lot about many of the people in his life. I think I've met most of them, but I wanted to meet more of them. Since they're important to him, I thought I should get to know them as his future wife. It was still a bit hard to say that. Not that marrying Naruto was something she hated. In fact, lately she was starting to get comfortable with the idea. She could have been chosen to marry a lot worse in her opinion. It was that she was 16 and going to marry already at that age next month. Given that, I felt I should meet them, Temari added. Plus we haven't really gotten any visitors, so I wanted to make sure they knew they were welcomed in our household. Although that pervert of a Sanin better be on his good behavior from now on, Temari darkly thought. Well, that's good to hear. Uruka smiled at her. I kept meaning to come by, but I've been busy lately with all the tests this week. But I would like to stop by as I haven't seen Naruto in a while and want to see how he's doing. Temari gave a small smile at the man. He gave off a very friendly vibe and he seemed to really care about Naruto. In their talks together, she got the feeling that Naruto looked up to Uruka like an older brother in many ways. She could see that the feeling was mutual here as well for the older man. I was wondering, thought, Temari said. Could you tell me more about him? I mean, every time I think I know more about Naruto, something just comes up, and well. Uruka gave a small laugh at that. Yeah, he's very surprising, isn't he? I've known him for years and he still surprises me at times. So what would you like to know about him? Anything you can tell me. I want to know what his life was like here at school. Temari noted a slight drop in his smile. Well, he was always a unique student, Uruka sighed. He pulled pranks, got into trouble, and he just really acted out a lot. Although I know he's a good kid, he just wanted attention and didn't care how or what kind of attention he got growing up. Because he was an orphan and didn't have any family, Temari stated, but as Uruka nodded, she felt like he was holding back something else but couldn't place what it was. I lost my parents at an early age as well, but I still remember them, Uruka said solemnly. It was tougher for Naruto since he has no memory at all of who his parents were. Do you know? Temari asked him. I'm sorry, I don't, and I wish I did. The older man sighed. He once asked me himself when he was younger, but I couldn't tell him anything. He looked so sad at that, and I can't think of a worse thing for not knowing your parents or family. Temari thought back to her mother and brothers, but when she got to her father, there was no love for that image. She had nothing but a cold attachment to him, as he was a father in blood only to her. So cold to everyone, even his own family, plus he had been the one to force the demon into Gaara. It was that she guessed that led to the death of her mother as well, so to her she could have lived without knowing that part of her family. So how come his grade have been so bad? Temari asked him, who looked a little surprised by the question. I've heard Sasuke call him an idiot and dead last many times, and I found out he was at the bottom of the class, but it makes no sense. He's shown a lot more skill than most genin his age and even has some skills above a chunin. Uruka was surprised at that. Sure, he knew Naruto was special and had gotten stronger since his time at the academy, but this girl's claims were more than he thought that Naruto had done. Then again, lately he had heard people talking about Naruto in a more positive light. Sure, some people were still against him, mainly the civilian branch of the village, but a lot of the ninjas had been impressed by him lately. The rumor of how he had defeated Gaara was also going around. Many thought that was in some way linked to Temari being here as well. Really? How so? Uruka asked, interested. Well, he can summon toads. I'm teaching him wind manipulation and he can use something called a Rasengan. Uruka was struck with surprise at the last part. He knew what the Rasengan was, as did most of the ninja in the village. His surprise was later turned into a very proud smile as Naruto was starting to shape up into a great ninja. There's something else I've been hoping to ask. Temari had figured with the small talk out of the way she could get into the real heart of the matter. I was hoping that if you knew his family then you could explain something to me, but I guess that's out of the question now. You see, I've been noticing cold looks at Naruto. At first I thought it was me, as I know there are many that still don't like Suna. But the cold looks that Naruto gets seems to also be when I'm not close to him. I thought maybe the Uzumaki family had done something in the past and it fell onto Naruto's shoulders. Uruka suddenly didn't like where this was going. The girl was digging into Naruto's past and that wasn't good. The secret of the 9 tails was an S-class secret, and so far the girl had noticed how some of the older generation still had a cold hatred for Naruto, or at least what was inside of him. Well, he has pulled many pranks in his life and some people never can forget or forgive, he said to her, hoping to evade the truth. Temari didn't look convinced by that. I thought about it, but it wouldn't add up with the amount of looks he gets. There's something more and I had been hoping that to find out what the source of it was. Uruka could see that Temari was a smart girl who could see more than what was on the surface, that was both good and bad. Good for her out in the field, as that had saved lives of many ninja from failing to fall into traps and ambushes. But the bad thing was she was putting that into looking into Naruto's past. Temari was going to say something else, but she was interrupted when a very loud voice was heard. Uruka-sensei. Temari turned to see 3 kids running into the room, and they seemed familiar for some reason to Temari, especially the loud one with the long scarf. Konohamaru, what is going on? Why aren't you 3 outside with the others? Uruka asked them. We accidentally kicked the ball we were using onto the roof and hoped you could let us go up and get it, Konohamaru said, and then noticed the tall blonde girl there. It took a moment for him to realize that he knew this girl. The last time he had seen her she had been wearing a white battle dress and not the purple one she had on now. Ah, I know you. Konohamaru pointed accusingly at her. You were with that jerk with the makeup on his face. Then it clicked where Temari had met him. He had been the little brat that ran into her younger brother Kankuro. Konohamaru, be nice. This is Temari-san, who will be marrying Naruto, Uruka told the young boy. All 3 kids looked shocked at the news. Naruto had told them that he was stuck into this, but they didn't know who the girl was. Although this was something that he never would have thought, that the mean blonde girl from before was marrying Naruto. Why does Naruto Nichan have to marry this girl? Konohamaru pouted angrily. Temari narrowed her eyes at that. Was the kid implying that she wasn't good enough for Naruto? She was the daughter of the late Kage, top of her class and one of the best damn kunoichi in her age group and even in a few other age groups. She had given up a lot for this alliance marriage as well, and she would be damned if this little brat said she wasn't good enough. With hands on her hips she leaned down to glare at the little kid. He had the good sense to take a slight step back from her. Look, brat, it's not like either of us had a choice in the matter, but we're both making the best of it. Yeah, well, you better be nice to him or else. The little kid threatened. Although everyone in the room knew it was an empty threat, he was just trying to stick up for Naruto and look tough in front of everyone. Temari looked at the kid and for a split second, she thought him almost a mini clone of Naruto at that moment. In fact, he acted a lot like the blonde boy, and she started to see the influence Naruto seemed to have on him. The boy seemed to really look up to Naruto, almost with a kind of hero worship. She was wondering what he did to get the boy's total respect like this. Temari gave a small smile. You really look up to him, huh? Konohamaru was puzzled by that for a moment. Yeah. Why is that? The boy wasn't sure if he should say and looked to his two best friends who nodded. Well, before him everyone called me, honorable grandson, just because my grandpa he looked a bit saddened at that. It still hurt that his grandfather was gone now. He had gotten over that fact that Tsunade was now Hokage, but still it was a missing piece of his life that he would never get back. Was the Hokage. He finished. Temari hadn't known that. In fact, it was Orochimaru that had tricked her village into attacking and this boy's grandfather, as well as was responsible for so much death. Everyone called me by that title and no one outside of my family called me Konohamaru, the boy continued. Everyone treated me differently and I didn't like it. It was like no one saw the real me and only this, honorable grandson, they kept calling me. I wanted to be seen as Konohamaru, as myself. But then Naruto was the first one to notice me, the real me. Konohamaru's face seemed to light up at this point. He takes time to play with us and teaches us all kinds of things. He's the first real friend I had before I met Moegi and Udon. Yeah, Naruto Nichan is the best, Moegi said as Udon nodded his head. Temari should have known that Naruto would have this effect on people. After all, it was him that seemed to have changed Gaara for the better. Wherever he went, the boy seemed to bring new life into the lives of others. So what has he been teaching you kids anyway? Iruka suddenly got a very bad feeling at this point when he saw the familiar glint in Konohamaru's eyes. It was the same look Naruto gave before he pulled off that technique. He taught me this great move that he made up for dealing with perverts. He then ran through the hand signs before Iruka could yell at him to stop. Why jutsu? Temari saw the smoke and the shock on her face would have been priceless to her brother. There before her was now a very attractive brunette girl in a seductive pose who was totally with a few pieces of smoke here and there. There was a thud as her head wiped around to see Iruka on the floor with blood from his nose. She then turned her attention back to the woman with a glare. Konohamaru turned back into his normal form with his eyes closed in a huge smile. What do you think? It's one of his most famous creations. Temari didn't say a word until she got close enough to the boy and gripped his ear very painfully. The boy yelled out as he tried to break away, but she gripped it tighter, letting him know that he wasn't getting away and shouldn't try. Are you telling me that Naruto, my Naruto, made that jutsu and taught it to a kid? Temari said in an angry tone. Why, yeah. The boy winced as his ear was starting to hurt. I'm going to him, Temari said as she let go of his ear. I never want to see you pull something like that in front of me again. Are we clear? The three kids nodded as one as they took a few paces back in fear of the blonde woman. They watched as she stalked out of the room in search of her fiancé and teach him the proper things that you do and do not teach children. The Konohamaru Corps watched her leave and were starting to pray that Naruto could either outrun her or hope she didn't actually him. Iruka had managed to recover, and although he didn't like that jutsu, at least he wouldn't admit to liking it. He had to be thankful that it got Temari's mind off Naruto's past. This could end up bad, Iruka thought as he cleaned off the blood on his jacket. She's getting a little too close. I'll have to talk to Naruto about this, as only he can be the one to tell her, or at last he should tell her. She'll have to know eventually, but I just hope he can trust her enough to open up about this. Later that day, Naruto and Sakura were walking out of the hospital. Both of them were happy that Lee was in high spirits for his operation and had already challenged Naruto to a spar when he got all better. Naruto, being Naruto, agreed to it all too happily. Sakura was amazed that Tsunade could be able to heal the kind of damage done to Lee. She was truly an amazing person. I'm so glad that Lee will get better, Sakura said as they walked on together. Yeah, I'm sure that Tsunade Bachan will heal him up in no time, Naruto said with that ever-present fox-like grin on his face. Sakura gave a small smile and nodded. Sometimes I wish I could be as strong as her, Sakura wished out loud. She's one of the strongest ninja in the world and can heal so many things that most people would think impossible. Hey, you're getting stronger every day, Sakura-chan, Naruto said to his friend. Temari is helping you out and Kakashi-sensei isn't being as lazy as usual, well except on those stupid D-rank missions. But you shouldn't sell yourself short, we've all have come a long way and we can all still get stronger together. Sakura was grateful for Naruto's outlook, he always made things better for some reason. Still, she had been wondering just what kind of ninja she wanted to be lately. She was learning her water jutsus and nearly got them down perfectly, her hand-to-hand was getting a lot better, her genjutsu was just above average, mostly dealing with spotting and disrupting them. Temari was a long-range wind user with tactical thinking, Sasuke was a mid to close range fighter with his Sharingan to copy the moves of the enemies made him a great fighter. Naruto, she had to admit, was just as good lately, his skills were growing so fast she couldn't keep up with him. But what could she say of herself? She thought of other teams and how they blended well into each other, each person's special talents complemented each other. Tenten was a weapons mistress in the making, Neji was a great fighter and scout, Lee's specialty in taijutsu, Ino with her mind abilities could gain information like no one else, Shino with his bugs, Kiba with Akamaru were great trackers, and the list went on. So what could she say about herself that made her stand out? Overall she was very average, so what was her strengths? She had great chakra control, but what could that be used for? So far the only two main options would be genjutsu, but that wasn't Kakashi's specialty. If she had been put with Kurenai, she was sure that she would have gone that route, but the only other thing was medical jutsu, and who could train in her in that? Hey Sakura-chan, what are you thinking so hard about? Naruto asked, seeing how quiet she had been. Her face had taken on a serious thinking expression. Huh, oh nothing, just thinking about the future is all, she said, smiling at him. She didn't want to worry him, after all this was her problem and she wanted to be the one to figure it out. Naruto just shrugged and let it rest as they walked on. Eventually they had to go their separate ways and said goodbye to each other. Naruto was walking on his way to his home and wondered if Temari would be home yet. He smiled at that, it felt really nice to go home and someone could actually be there for once. Hey, Naruto. Naruto looked over and saw Iruka waving to him. The boy got a huge smile on his face, he hadn't seen him in a while. Iruka-sensei. Naruto yelled and ran over to him. How have you been, Naruto? The man asked him. Naruto put on that foxy grin of his again. It's going great, I'm learning all kinds of new things and I've gotten tons stronger. So I've heard. Iruka smiled and then he got a more serious look on his face. Naruto, I have something important to talk to you about. But not here, it's something we can't really talk about in the open. Naruto blinked in confusion for a bit until he figured out what he was talking about and he felt his stomach sink. It had to be about the fox, as there was nothing else that Iruka could mean. Naruto nodded and they quickly left for Iruka's apartment. Naruto sat down on the couch as Iruka sat down with him, and Naruto was a little worried about just what he wanted to talk about exactly. Naruto, you should know that Temari came by the school today, Iruka said to him. She was looking into your past, it would seem. Naruto got a very bad feeling at the moment, he had seen how smart she had been. Hell, that shogi game she had brought with her, he had never even came close to beating her, and she knew a lot of things as well. He would have to say she was one of the smartest people he knew. If she put together that his birthday was the same day that the Kyuubi was defeated, she might start to put things together. He looked down at his feet. Things were finally starting to go well, and now if she found out about the demon she might hate him. It wasn't fair how this stupid fox inside of him kept screwing with his life. No one had wanted to adopt him, no one would recognize him, and he had been alone for most of his life because of it. Sure, things had gotten a bit better lately, but he was still afraid. It was the fear of being rejected and going back to that loneliness again that prevented him from telling his friends the truth. He just didn't want to lose more to the damn fox again. He had too much taken from him by that demon as it was. Naruto, maybe you should tell her before she finds out, Iruka said gently to him. But what if she hates me? Naruto asked him desperately. I mean, maybe she won't find out. Iruka gave him a look of pity as the boy had to deal with so much in his life. Naruto, I think she might figure things out sooner or later. Plus she'll be your wife soon, so doesn't she have a right to know? Naruto felt a little guilty at that. He still remembered how on that trip to get Tsunade, he had ran into Itachi Uchiha and that strange fish guy. They had been after him because of what was inside of him. They had even gotten into the village and put Kakashi in the hospital as well. If they came again, would they use Temari against him? He could see them doing it as well, and it didn't seem right to put her in danger and not tell her. It will be better if it came from you than some stranger, or if she figured it out. Those words hit him just as hard. Orochimaru was still in his bed as he tried to blot out the pain in his arms. It had been too long since that old man had taken his arms from him with that jutsu. If the old man wasn't dead, he would have him in the most slow and painful of ways. He grunted in pain as his arms were slowly decaying. Having the flesh of your body slowly falling apart on you gave you pain unlike anything a person could imagine. Of course, he knew it wasn't really his body. His original body was long since gone. All the research into immortality had left him only one option: to cast off an old body like a snake sheds its skin. The bodies, of course, would have to be injected and altered so that he would be able to use some of his more special abilities. It was time-consuming, but thankfully he had refined the process by now. At first it took him nearly a year for the body to be altered enough, but now it only took a few months. But no matter what, he could never make the bodies last. They burned out too quickly for him. 3 years, and he needed to find a new host, and he had to be careful because not just any body would do. Orochimaru had to make sure they were strong bodies, as weak ones wouldn't last as long and they couldn't be enhanced enough with all the drugs and forbidden techniques he needed to put into them. He had learned early on to not just have one person to be his next host, but to find those that were perfect for him was hard to find. Only the truly exceptional could be his body, like Kimimaro, the leader of the Sound 5. Well, Sound 4 now, his bloodline ability was truly one of a kind. But the boy was dying and wouldn't last even with the curse mark on him, and so the boy was on life support, kept alive for the last time. Orochimaru would need him. A few others could be used, but he wanted Sasuke Uchiha. The Sharingan with the ability to copy all jutsu would let him learn in 3 years what would take him 300 years to learn. After his failure with Itachi, Sasuke was the only option. While true the boy was a bit too young, Orochimaru had ways to alter the body to that of a more adult form. But he needed the boy for other reasons. With the boy's body he could use the DNA to help recreate the Uchiha clan. His previous experiments in Konoha before his exile, he had been trying to recreate the wood abilities of the first, and he felt he had been close. One had survived, and although he didn't know it, he had heard rumors of a masked Anbu with wood abilities. When he heard of that, Orochimaru had started up with his DNA project again, and when he got Sasuke he could find a way to make a whole new line of Sharingan users to use in the future. He could infuse a fetus with that and let it grow in a tank, or he could always do artificial insemination. He had plans for both at any point. The strongest female warriors were already picked out in advance, and Kabuto kept an eye out for any future prospects. Unlike his ex-teammate, he never was interested in the whole UAL side of relationships. To Orochimaru it seemed too vulgar a process. He never understood that part of humanity and he never would, he just felt it was a good thing he was like this. It was only a distraction and he could focus more on his work. Pain flared up again in his arms and he cried out for Kabuto. He needed more medicine to help with the pain. Soon the flesh of his arms wouldn't be able to hold together and then infections would start to spread through his body. Even with all the enhancements, if his body was too weak he could still get sick. Kabuto tried to numb the nerves but for some reason it wasn't working. He yelled again when the boy hadn't shown up. The door flew open as Kabuto rushed into the room. Orochimaru yelled for more medicine and the boy ran to the side table where they all were. He injected several compounds into his body through the ruined arms, and then into the main body. The needles were less painful than his arms at the moment, but soon the pain started to lessen. It never left him, but it was now tolerable. Where the hell is Sasuke? Orochimaru demanded. The Sound Four are still watching him as per your orders, Kabuto said as he put the medicine away. Apparently he's been training himself trying to learn how to use your little gift so far. But they haven't risked being seen yet, even though thanks to your knowledge on Konoha's security they could still be found out. I don't know how much longer I can wait, Orochimaru said angrily. If the old fool hadn't used that jutsu on me I could afford to wait, but I need a new body. With Tsunade's refusal to heal me I need a new body. He still was supposed to have at least 2 years more with this new body, but he had to change quickly. Normally changing so fast wasn't a good idea as it would weaken him to keep changing too fast, but he had no choice. He wanted the Uchiha body for so long and one was almost within his grasp. The boy's lust for power, for revenge would surely motivate the boy to seek him out. Plus the curse seal was also there. It would give him power while feeding on his negative emotions and even increasing them. That was one of his best pieces of work, something that would slowly twist the minds that used them. The darker the urges, the better the seal would work. It was unfortunate that his first success in Anko had been a disappointment. The girl would have made a fine apprentice and maybe even a good host body one day. But she lacked the need for power. She had been physically strong enough to survive, but she was too weak as a person. She was too soft, and so he left her to die in that place. He had been surprised to learn she had survived, but it had been fun to run into his old student again. She had grown but was still too soft. The curse mark worked against her because she fought against it, instead of embracing it. Lord Orochimaru, Kabuto asked him, how much longer do I have? Orochimaru asked. At the rate of decay I would say 2 weeks at best. Orochimaru's face twisted in pain and anger. He couldn't afford to wait that long. Sasuke was taking too long to join him and he was quickly running out of options. Start the preparations for a new host, Orochimaru spat out. Uchiha District. Sasuke had been working hard on trying to understand the seal that Orochimaru put on him. After his team was let go for the day he had gotten as many scrolls on sealing and seals that he could from the library of his clan. Although he only knew the simple ones for how to seal weapons, he had thought it wouldn't be that tough. Although called a genius, it turned out that seals required a different type of genius. The formulas were very complex and just getting a rudimentary grasp of it was difficult. There was also the fact that Orochimaru had created this seal himself and there were no official records, although he bet there were classified ones, but even he couldn't get those. Only high-ranking Jonins would be the only ones to get those kinds of records and would most likely need to have the Hokage's approval too. He knew he couldn't go to Kakashi to ask for them because he wouldn't approve of what he was doing. Sasuke needed more power and this seal seemed like the best way to go about it. He remembered when it first activated, he had never felt so powerful or so alive at that moment. He had been enjoying himself in ways he had thought lost to him. When he had been trying to tear that Sound Genin's arms off, he had liked it. All battles after, he had never felt like that again, and he was wondering why. In battle he only thought about victory, but that point he had for the first time actually liked being in battle. He had thrived in the heat of the moment and from even the pain he had been inflicting at the time to the Sound Genin. At any rate, so far the seal was too complicated for him to figure anything out. Whatever it was, he had to work it out on his own. Which led him to his practice sessions by the lake, where he had mastered that fire jutsu. That had been when his father had finally taken notice of him. When his father had told him that he was going to train Sasuke personally, Sasuke had been overjoyed. He had been living in his older brother's shadow all his life, and finally he was being recognized. He had gone to bed that night happier than he had been in a long time and couldn't wait until the next day. But that was the night when his world was destroyed. Itachi had but butchered his clan and family, had tortured him for 3 days and left him broken there among the blood and corpses of his mother and father. He was alone in the world. There was no brother to look up to, no father for advice, and no mother who always made him feel safe and warm. All he felt was the numbing cold of the hole that was left in his life. Sasuke started up his warm-up routine as he started to practice his family fighting style. He remembered the times his brother would train him. Back then everything was good. He had loved his older brother and looked up to him, which what made his betrayal all the more hard on the younger Sasuke. The one person he thought he could trust, shattered that bond forever. Sasuke threw out a series of punches as the memories came flooding back to him. He remembered after he had been found, how he had been in the hospital for a few months. He was shaken by the experience. He hadn't been able to sleep at night at all. Every shadow he had looked to see if Itachi would come back to finish the job. Sasuke had waited all night long in case his older brother had changed his mind and came to him too. He could only sleep in the days when he felt safe, but at night he waited. Sasuke now started with the kicking combos, then into blocks and parries. His body moved on its own as his mind battled with the memories that were swarming him. The fact was that he didn't hate Itachi at first, no, that came later. At first he had been scared of Itachi, scared that he was going to wake up one night with Itachi over his bed. Those red eyes glaring at him as he plunged a sword into Sasuke's heart. After a few months, when he knew Itachi wasn't coming back, he had gone home for the first time. He had seen the empty homes and streets, and he could see the fresh paint to cover the blood that had been spilt there. He stood in the center of the Uchiha district for a long time that day. He felt the tears fall for the first time that day. He had fallen to his knees as he cried his heart out. All that pain and rage he had been bottling up came pouring out of him. He howled his anger into the empty area. He didn't know how long he had been there. The sun had been setting at that point, but by the end of it he felt empty. There were no more tears in him, and he hadn't cried again since that day. He had used up all the tears left in his life in a single moment. All that was left was the emptiness, that cold empty feeling like a hole in his chest. But soon he felt something else there, a cold burning sensation. It was the cold fury that was building up in him. He looked up with hard eyes around him. It was at that moment when he truly vowed to his brother, to seek revenge for his entire clan. Sasuke felt the pain where the mark was flaring up. It was an intense sensation, and for a moment he could barely stand. The pain slowly faded as he tried to think what caused it to flare up like that. Kakashi had told him that the seal around it was only as strong as his will, but something else must have happened. He had been thinking long and hard about the cursed seal, why it worked at the start and why the other times it had activated it had only weakened him. That first time it activated, that was what he needed to try and focus on. When he had fought Gaara, he had needed more power and it had activated, but not like the first time. His body wouldn't respond normally and he felt even weaker. So what was different about the Gaara fight and the fight with the Sound Genin? He came to realization it was the emotions involved. With Gaara he had felt fear and doubt, but not with the Sound Genin. There was more too. It had flared up just when he was thinking of that day he had made his vow to his clan. Something in that moment had triggered it as well. Well, I could try it, not like I got anything to lose. Sasuke thought to himself. He closed his eyes and tried to remember that day again. He tried to focus on the pain and rage that had been inside of him. He thought of Itachi and what he had done. He thought of their last fight and how he had gone after Naruto of all people. His brother had tossed him aside like he was nothing but had been focused only on Naruto. Naruto, why? Why are you so strong now? You're the dead last. You come from no clan, have no bloodline, there is nothing special about you, and yet you keep getting stronger. You kept getting taught the things that I could use to complete my mission. Even Suna sees something in you, most likely for beating Gaara. So why? What makes him so special? Sasuke yelled out as the curse seal activated. He cried out in pain, but this time he didn't try to fight it. He embraced what he was feeling and soon the pain was passing. The black marks, if he could see, were crawling over his body, now covering half of it. He started to feel the power flowing into him and it felt great, better than great even. He threw his head back and laughed as the feeling of the raw power rushing through his body. This is it. This is the power that I need. Now I just need to tame it. Sasuke thought to himself as he grinned. He started his physical workout, trying to see how long he could keep the curse seal's power flowing through his body. He was faster and stronger like this. When he met Itachi again, he would use the power of this seal as a surprise, and finally his brother. Uzumaki home. Temari had been looking all over for Naruto. She tried the ramen stand and then the fourth's head, but so far no luck. Even the Hokage hadn't seen him and none of his friends either. After she had left the school, she was on a mission to find Naruto and to let him know that teaching kids those kinds of things were not okay. She was still pissed after all this time, in fact not only pissed but her feet worrying her, which only made her more mad. There was only one place left to check and that was at home. She stopped in her tracks at that thought. When the hell did I ever start to think of this place as home? Temari asked herself. While she still considered Suna her home and always will, she was surprised by how she was starting to think of her two-story house as home. She sure didn't count the village as home, at least not yet. But for some reason the house was starting to feel like home to her. Sure, she had all her stuff there, but it was more than that, more than just having a place to live. She was actually starting to enjoy her life with Naruto. It was odd, but she was starting to actually like the guy. He made you feel at ease with yourself. He was always warm and his happiness was infectious at times. She shook her head, remembering that she was supposed to be mad at him. As the house came into view, she noticed something on the roof. As she came closer, she could see that someone was sitting on it. Temari had an idea of who it was as well. All that walking around and he was there the entire time. Temari wasn't sure to be pissed or just happy that she had finally found him. She quickly managed to get onto the roof and there he was, sitting there with his knees pulled up and his arms resting on them. He was looking far off, but his eyes weren't focused as he was in deep thought about something. Temari was about to get out her battle fan when she stopped and took notice of his face. While living with him, she had seen the various faces he had, but this was one she had never seen before. She couldn't help but notice just how different it was, and she was wondering if she was seeing a hidden side of him. Well, I'll ask what's going on. Then I'll give him hell for teaching children that perverted jutsu. Alright, so what the hell is wrong? Temari asked, the irritation in her voice she couldn't hide. Naruto jumped at her voice. He had been so deep in thought that he hadn't even noticed her arriving. He put on that smiling face of his as he scratched the back of his head nervously. For the past hour or so he had been about what to say and how to go about this. He knew that she deserved to know the full truth of the matter, but he couldn't help but worry how she would see him. Oh, well, I guess nothing much. He chuckled but soon stopped, seeing the serious look on her face. Naruto, she said simply, more like a hidden command than her asking him anything. He flinched a bit before he sighed and looked back out over the village as he got more serious again. Hey Temari, what if you knew something about me, something that might change how you see me? Now Temari was losing her previous anger as she was getting more interested. Was this that something that she had been looking into? Was this that secret that seemed to surround the blonde ninja? She sat down next to him, looking at him. She could see the look in his eyes. They held a pain in them that she hadn't seen in a very long time. She remembered how Gaara's eyes had looked like that, all that pain and loss. Then one night Gaara had changed and his eyes took on that awful look in them. The look of a madman that would anyone, even her. For years she had been terrified of Gaara, but then Naruto had changed him. Looking at those blue expressive eyes of his, she was reminded of those old times. Naruto, you can tell me, whatever it is. She told him, her voice gaining a bit more of a gentle tone. She wasn't sure why, but seeing those eyes he had one now reached her. She felt a part of her wanting to comfort him. She wanted to see that usual happy look in them. Naruto was silent a moment, trying to get his courage. It's just that, have you noticed how some of the villagers don't like me? Temari nodded her head. There's a reason for it. It's not as bad as it used to be lately, but I guess I can see why many of the older generation didn't like me. Naruto said. Do you know of the Kyuubi attack over 13 years ago? Temari nodded. Yeah, I read about it. The great nine-tailed fox, the most powerful of all the Biju, it attacked here and it was your fourth Hokage that did it. Well, it turns out that it wasn't really, Naruto said. Temari was confused as everyone knew the story, even those outside the village. It was said even Iwagakure no Sato celebrated the death of the fourth every year on October 10th. There was something about that date that was nagging her for some reason. It took her a moment to realize that it was Naruto's birthday. She had memorized as much on him that Suna had, and it was listed his birthday as October 10th. In fact, doing the math, he had been born on the day the demon had attacked. Then she remembered his fight with Gaara, when he had turned himself and that huge toad into a replica of the Nine Tails. The sudden realization came crashing down on her, and why shouldn't it? After all, if she was right, then Naruto was exactly like Gaara. You're a Jinchuriki, she said, surprised by the revelation. Naruto was taken aback by that. He didn't figure that she would figure it out. She was a lot smarter than he had originally thought. So, you're like Gaara then, she said to him. Yeah. Naruto nodded his head, a little afraid to look her in the eyes. He didn't want to see any fear in them. He was actually starting to like her, and it would be just like his luck for her to not like him because of the stupid fox in his body. A lot of the older generation didn't like me because they saw me as the demon and not the jailer, Naruto said sadly. They never did anything physical, but no one would look at me, and the few that did, they only gave me those cold eyes. Some would say things like, demon brat, and monster, to me. Temari couldn't help but feel bad. She had seen what that kind of life had done to Gaara. It was amazing that Naruto hadn't turned out the same. So everyone knows. Naruto shook his head. The third placed a law that no one was to talk about it or tell anyone else. The old man hoped that everyone in the younger generation would see me normally, but it didn't work out so good. Temari could guess. the parents would most likely encourage their children to have the same behavior towards Naruto that they had. Children, being children, wouldn't really question their parents after all. In a way, it made her sick, but then again, how was she any different? Maybe if she had tried harder to be a better sister to Gaara, he wouldn't have turned out the same way. Her father had told her and Kankuro to avoid Gaara, and like the good daughter, she had done that. It was just another reason she felt nothing for her father. He had torn their family apart. I was alone for a very long time, Naruto said to her, but then a small smile got on his lips. But I had the old man, he could visit me often, and then I found Iruka-sensei. And now I have a lot of friends and people that care for me, and people who I will protect. Temari was amazed that he could think that way. Was what got through to Gaara? Was this the reason that he had liked the idea of her marrying Naruto, because her baby brother could relate to the other boy? To go through that kind of life and not end up like Gaara spoke to Temari of the kind of inner strength the boy had. She smiled a little, remembering how she had seen that strength in the Chunin exams and against Gaara himself. Naruto's smile faded a bit. Anyways, I just figured you deserved to know the truth before the wedding. That you should know what you're getting into, and, well, I guess I can understand if you wouldn't want to be with me. There was a sudden silence, and then Naruto felt a fist hitting the back of his head. Baka! Temari shouted angrily at him. You really think that would mean much to me? Naruto, holding the back of his head, looked at her surprised. My brother went through all of that too, he's like you, remember? Well, yeah, but you were really scared of Gaara, weren't you? He asked her, confused. He would remember the terror that had been on her face when Gaara first showed up in that tree. He had been afraid to see that look of terror in her eyes when she was looking at him. But she wasn't afraid of him, angry sure, but he could live with that. Temari's anger fell away knowing what he was getting at. I was afraid of Gaara, for so long he would have anyone if he felt like it. It was always dangerous being around him, but after you two fought, something in him had changed. Before I came here we were actually repairing our relationship. I don't know if I ever thanked you for that, but I do. She looked him in the eyes and gave him a small smile. Thank you for giving me my brother back. Naruto blinked a few times and smiled. He remembered how Gaara had seemed different, but he hadn't known about how Temari wasn't terrified of him anymore. Temari sighed as she recomposed herself. Anyways, it doesn't matter. It does explain a few things about you though. You're the first person I told this secret to, Naruto said, a bit happy how she took it. I mean, I was afraid if others found out they would treat me like the older generation. Well, they're idiots, she said to him. And you're an idiot for thinking that of me. You should learn to trust me more. After all, we're going to be married soon, so we might as well start to trust each other more. Naruto smiled and nodded. Yeah, you're right. I promise, no more secrets between us. Temari nodded her head in agreement. So, how come the demon hasn't overcome you? Temari asked out of curiosity. I mean, Gaara can't sleep because of that demon, and he's got the weakest in him. Naruto blinked, not sure exactly. I guess the seal on me is different. I've only talked to the damn fox once, after I got pushed off a cliff. Stupid arrow Senin. He pushed you off a cliff. Temari wondered what the hell was wrong with that old pervert. It was to get me to draw on the fox's chakra, and although I hate it, it did work. Temari made a mental note to not take any kind of training with that old man. He seemed to take things to the extreme. Can I see your seal? Naruto blushed a bit as he pulled up his shirt. He closed his eyes and gathered the chakra. Temari was curious as the kind of seal that was on Naruto. She wanted to see the difference between this one and the one on her brother. Basically, she wanted a comparison to see if there might be a reason why they had such a difference. She got her answer when she saw the seal on Naruto's stomach of all places. Temari wasn't a seal master or even know all that much other than the basics, but just by looking at the seal she knew it wasn't a normal one. It was the most complex thing she had ever seen. She tried to figure out the bits and pieces she could guess at, but overall it was way beyond her. It was also a lot more complex and strong than what Gaara had on him. This explained why Naruto wasn't tormented by his demon, it was held back by the power of this seal. You're lucky you know that. Naruto was confused by her statement when he pulled down his shirt. That kind of seal would let you have a lot more control. Gaara isn't so lucky. Temari sighed. Even with your help, he's constantly at war with the demon, he has been all his life. If he had a seal like this on him, he might have had a lot more control and even able to sleep normally. Naruto hadn't thought about it that way. He always cursed the fact he had this sealed in him when he found out. But after meeting Gaara, he could see where he could have easily been like that. If the fox ever got more control over him, he knew the fox would make him harm anyone and everything around him. Then he thought that maybe there was a way to help him, he only just learned how to seal stuff into scroll. But Naruto did remember how Jiraiya had helped him with that thing Orochimaru did to his seal. A smile grew on his face as he planned to ask him the next time he saw him, if he could help Gaara with this seal like he had done with Naruto's. Now though he was feeling a lot better, he had been so worried that Temari would reject him, but he guessed he should have known better. She was the first person that he had admitted his greatest secret to, and she had accepted him, and it felt great. But in the end things had worked out, and he was hoping that maybe his friends would one day accept this truth as well, when he was ready, that is to tell them. Naruto. Temari said to him. Yeah? He asked, and just as he turned he was hit on the head with her battle fan. Now he may have a hard head, but that thing was heavy and it hurt like hell. He fell onto his back covering his head. What was that for? Naruto managed to say after a moment. That was for something called Waijutsu, she said angrily, and Naruto froze up. He looked up at the very angry girl towering over him. How did you know about that? Naruto asked carefully, the pain in his head forgotten for the moment. He was too scared to feel pain. I met that little brat, Konohamaru. She grinned evilly at him. Naruto groaned in his head. For the first time he really wished he hadn't taught him that move. He yelped out when she grabbed him by his collar and glared daggers at him right into his face. He was nervously sweating by now. He had forgotten how scary she could be when she was pissed. Now you look here, Temari said dangerously. We can't get out of his marriage, but there will be some ground rules. First off, you are never to use that thing in public. I may be a leaf genin now, but I am still the daughter of a Kage, and we both have to put on a good face in the public because of the alliance our marriage represents. Furthermore, you will not teach that to any of our children. It's bad enough that you taught a child such a thing, but you will not do the same for ours. You got that? She told him, and he flat out nodded his head as fast as he could. Good, she said calmly and dropped him. But make no mistake, Naruto, you'll have a lot of foot rubs to make up for that. It had been a couple of days since Naruto had told Temari his secret, and things had gone well. After she had calmed down, he found out that his soon-to-be wife could hold a grudge. It was still odd to think they were going to be married soon. Tsunade was already saying that she was putting Shizune in charge of organizing it, although Naruto felt that his big sister had enough to deal with under Tsunade at times. He already had to read up on this scroll about wedding ceremonies. He needed someone to stand by him as his best man. He planned to ask Sasuke, but given his attitude lately he was thinking of a backup just in case. He had been talking with Temari and she agreed to have Moegi for her flower girl, and he would ask the young girl the next time he saw her with Konohamaru. He was going to ask the boy to be the ring bearer for it, knowing full well the boy would be excited for the job. The only thing that he wasn't looking forward to was the traditional sake used in it. He wasn't sure even if he was old enough to drink. Turns out that once someone became a genin, they were a legal adult in the eyes of the village. After all, you couldn't send children into battle and turbid. So long ago it was agreed by all 5 cages that regardless of age, a genin was an adult and would be treated like one. Although this only was seen in ninja villages, of course, apparently there were plenty of civilian villages that didn't always know about that law. At any rate, Naruto had a lot on his mind. He had just finished his shower and had changed in the bathroom to save time. He placed his dirty clothing in the hamper that Temari told him to use from now on. Okay, so his room was cleaner now without the clothing all over the place and he could find things, but it took getting used to the habit. Temari was in her room looking over some scrolls for the marriage when he passed by. He reminded her that they had training soon and she said she would meet him there. After all, it wasn't like they could be late as Kakashi was hardly ever on time, although their sensei did seem to be more preoccupied lately. Naruto also needed to quickly get certain things he needed for the wedding as well, mainly he needed formal wear and some kind of dagger. He hoped that Iruka would be able to help him out on that as well. Man, who knew that there was so much to do for a wedding? Naruto thought as he exited the home. And I still need to get to Ba-chan to go over other things for it as well. At first he thought it would be just a simple affair, then again he had never been to a wedding before. Plus, since this was a political marriage, it meant the council will be there, heads of all the clans, important people of the village and those from Suna that would be arriving as well. The thought of being in the center of all that actually made him feel a little nervous. Naruto was currently on his way to track down Konohamaru before training when he suddenly realized something. Damn it! I forgot my headband. Naruto had never forgotten that before, it was just proof of how much was on his mind to actually forget it. He quickly created a shadow clone and told him to go and get it and meet him at training with it. Naruto ran off as he only had a little time to track down the young boy and ask him to be his ring bearer. The shadow clone ran off toward the bathroom knowing exactly where it was, since those clones were perfect copies of the original. What neither Naruto nor his clone knew was that Temari had just finished her morning shower. She was just drying her hair when she noticed a leaf headband near the sink. She picked it up and sighed. It wasn't hers, which meant it was Naruto's. Honestly, that guy would lose his head with the way he gets so excited, Temari sighed. She would give it to him later when they met up for training. Apparently he told her yesterday that he was going to see that scarf brat about something. She reached for the doorway and it was at this moment that the clone had come running. She pulled the door open just as the clone slammed into her. If the clone had hit her any harder, then the clone would have dispersed. But thanks to Temari softening the blow, it wasn't. The bad news was that the way they landed, Temari totally on her back with what she assumed was Naruto. She had thought he left, hence why she hadn't put the towel around her chest before opening the door. She lay there totally frozen in shock. The clone had no idea what happened. He saw a flash of something like skin before hitting something. His face was against something soft, warm and slightly wet, and not just his face. He was sure he was laying on something, but his face was pressed into something soft. He reached up with one hand to push himself up, but the hand gripped the thing next to his face. It was round all right, firm too, and there seemed to be some kind of a nub on it. The clone had no idea what he was feeling, but he pushed up and he froze in horror. There beneath him was Temari, a very red and Temari. He noticed his hand was gripped on one of her s. The clone suddenly got a nosebleed as this was the first real girl he had seen and he was groping her too. That was when Temari, in a very unlike Temari manner, did what any woman would do. She shrieked. The clone covering his bloody nose leapt back onto his butt. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Temari pulled up her legs and covered her S with one arm, now looking embarrassed and pissed off. Pervert. Wait. I'm a CL. The clone didn't finish before her free hand punched the clone in the face, and this time it did disperse. She stared in confusion at first, but then her anger started to grow. Naruto Uzumaki. Meanwhile, the real Naruto had been leaping from building to building when a sudden image and sensations hit him. Normally he had never noticed that he got all the memories and experiences of his clones. This was for several reasons. In a fight things got hectic and he never paid attention to anyone other than who he had been fighting. Another was that he just never thought about it. The main was that he was as dense as a brick at times. But the image of a Temari and the feel of her was one image that he couldn't ignore. He first got a huge nosebleed as he covered it with his hands. Unfortunately, this caused him to trip and fall onto the rooftop. He landed. He lay there in total shock and confusion. What the hell was that? Naruto yelled out. Did that really happen, or was I just imagining things? For the first time he really thought about the memory he just got, and he was surprised to learn that he remembered seeing himself, then going through the home and then, the bathroom. I got to find Kakashi-sensei. Naruto yelled as he went in search of his teacher to hopefully explain things. Maybe it was just all in his head. He hoped so, because Temari would be so angry with him if that had actually happened. Training field. Kakashi was making his way to the training field. He was a bit late, but that wasn't unusual. Although, lately Kakashi had been too busy to pay his normal respects to Obito and Rin. Even though her body was never found, she was presumed dead. So far he had managed to get Jiraiya to look at Anko's mark, and Kakashi had gone over a few seal improvements. Although it was still guesswork, since the only person that truly understood the curse marks was Orochimaru, progress was being made up. He could see how Anko was getting a little impatient, but she was keeping it bottled up. He couldn't blame her. If he found a way to help seal off the mark, Anko would love it. Then maybe he could see about Sasuke, and not a moment too soon. Lately the last Uchiha had been more distant and brooding lately. But at least the other members seemed to be doing fine. Sakura was training hard for once and was improving. Temari was starting to fit in, and Naruto was improving the most. He was glad that Temari was a wind user, as she was the perfect teacher for Naruto, and it would make them closer. Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi looked up to see a familiar orange blur running towards him. Naruto, what are you doing here instead of your team? Kakashi asked, and then noticed something. Where's your headband? Naruto blushed for some reason that made Kakashi raise a single eyebrow a bit. Obviously something had happened. Forgot it in the bathroom. Naruto looked about. Kakashi sighed. Naruto, I'm surprised at you for forgetting it. No matter, but don't make a habit of it. Since this is a first time you've done this, I'll overlook it. Forgetting the leaf headband while on duty was actually an offense in most ninja villages. Even though ninja dress codes were extremely relaxed, the headband was to always been worn, with the exception of black op missions when you can't be identified. For a genin to forget it, well, it wasn't too big a deal. Usually a small fine or punishment by the sensei would be enough. It got worse the higher in rank you went. Anyways, there's something important I need to ask you. Naruto shouted out as usual. Well, what is it? Kakashi asked him. It was obviously important for the boy. You use shadow clones too, right? Naruto asked, remembering the battle on the bridge in Wave. Well, do you ever remember anything they do? Kakashi just looked at him for a long moment, blinking a few times. He honestly didn't think that Naruto hadn't noticed until now. With the ways he used shadow clones, one would think he would notice that the clones sent all their experience back to the original. Naruto, are you telling me you haven't noticed until just now? that the experiences of your shadow clones go to you after they dispel? Kakashi asked him. Naruto got a surprised look on his face. Huh, you mean that's supposed to happen? Kakashi nearly face-faulted at that point. Naruto, of course it's supposed to happen. I know how you learned the technique from the Forbidden Scroll, didn't you read the explanation of it? Naruto scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. Not really. I wasn't really paying that much attention. Kakashi hung his head for a moment. He should have seen that coming. Anyway, that's the point of shadow clones, Naruto. You see, they're used mainly for information gathering. You send one into a dangerous area and anything they see you get at a safe distance. They are perfect copies, hence why they can go on their own unlike the simple clones. Naruto blinked a few times. Okay. Say you need to read 3 scrolls. You can use a shadow clone to read the other 2 and you can learn in a fraction of the time. Kakashi explained simply to him. Oh, I get it. Naruto suddenly fully understood. Hey, if I can learn in a fraction of the time, does that mean I can train faster too? Kakashi thought about it. Normally that wouldn't be possible. Shadow clones could be very hard on a person with long use, but for some reason, Naruto was perfect for it. Actually, while thinking on that, there could be something to it after all. Well, you would still have to work on your physical body. Shadow clones can't help you in that area. Why not? Naruto asked. Because if physical change could be transferred, any damage they got would be transferred to you. And given the number of lethal blows your clones have taken, Kakashi trailed off. Naruto gulped and nodded. He knew exactly what his sensei was talking about, and now he was glad that physical stuff wasn't transferred. Kakashi continued on with his explanation. Anyways, things like practicing fighting moves, meditation to increase focus, chakra use. Those kinds of things could be done. If you use one shadow clone for training and focus on its knowledge, then you'll train twice as fast. If you have 3, then you'll train 3 times as fast. Naruto's eye lit up at the possibilities now. With the number of clones he could make, he could train 50 times faster than anyone else. He got a huge grin on his face as he couldn't wait to try this out. Thanks a lot, Kakashi-sensei. Just be careful, Naruto. No one has ever trained like that before. So please, don't overdo it for once, Kakashi told him. Who do you think I am? He grinned up at the man. Kakashi sighed. Someone who always rushes in head first and always overdoes things, that's who. They made their way back to the training field and he noticed that Naruto suddenly tensed up. Kakashi cast a glance at the genin and tried to find what was making him nervous. He saw Temari there with a deep blush as she looked away, not even paying attention to Naruto. Trouble in paradise, huh? Kakashi mentally sighed. It was expected something would happen. No couple was perfect and they were forced into this after all. He just hoped whatever was wrong they would be able to work it out. Temari, when she saw Naruto, couldn't even look at him. She felt her face heat up as she quickly turned away from him. She couldn't even speak to him, especially since she couldn't yell at him for what happened. The last thing she wanted to know was for what happened to get out. Naruto knew that it hadn't actually been him that had, well, groped her. But he still remembered it, and how she looked and felt. He quickly tried not to think about it. He could feel the nosebleed coming on. Although it had felt so good, he didn't know a girl could feel that nice. Damn it, I'm hanging around Ero Sennin too much. Naruto yelled in his mind. Temari. Naruto nervously asked. He was making sure he was out of her range if she decided to hit him, which he felt he had coming anyway. Although what he wasn't expecting was the silent treatment, she wasn't even looking at him and for a moment he thought she hadn't heard him. Temari. He said a bit louder. Oh come on, I'm sorry, it was a total accident. Still nothing, and now he was getting worried. Sure, he got her mad before. But before, she would always yell at him. This silent treatment was a lot worse. Naruto also knew that he really screwed up this time as well. He was about to say something when she threw an object at him. He flinched and prepared to guard just in case, but he saw the item on the ground in front of him. It was his headband. He grinned as he picked it up and put it on. Hey, thanks, Temari. He smiled at her, thinking everything was okay. But she just walked past him and his smile dropped. Yeah, she's still mad, Naruto thought. How the hell am I going to make up for this? Temari was still a little fuming over this morning. After all, how else could you react to, well, what had happened? She crossed her arms co-consciously, remembering his hand on her. She had never let a boy touch her in that kind of way before, let alone seeing her. Her face burned up at that. Sure, it had been a shadow clone, but still she felt mortified. Plus, she wasn't too sure, but Naruto kept blushing when he looked at her. She wasn't sure how shadow clones worked, but she was wondering if he knew what had happened. The fact he tried to apologize to her even more so meant he knew. At the moment, she just wanted to keep her distance, to cool off at any rate. In a normal case, the offending boy, she would have hated him for such a thing. But Naruto was going to be her husband and she was supposed to have at least one child, so of course being in front of him would have to happen. But not by surprising her in the shower like that. Plus, she couldn't him, which would be bad for political reasons. That, and maybe, because lately she had grown to like him a bit. He had been the nicest person to her that she could remember, and she did enjoy spending time with him now and then too. He opened up with his big secret and she couldn't help but feel for him now. Every time she looked at him now, he reminded her of her brother in some ways. Plus, he really was a sweet guy, and she could have done a lot worse for herself. She could have ended up in some loveless marriage, or maybe even have been before she ever got this far. Sure, she wasn't in love with him, but for the first time she was considering opening her heart to another. Naruto wouldn't be someone that would hurt her, at least on purpose, and despite his obvious flaws, she saw the potential in him. But that didn't mean she had to just forgive him right off the bat. Hell no, she was pissed and he would have to work his off to make this better. She stopped when she noticed that there was someone coming up to her. She narrowed her eyes slightly in study. He looked like he was an older man, but it was kind of hard to tell. His body, when not covered in that cloak, was covered in many bandages. He limped pretty badly and got around with a cane as well. But despite this, the way he walked, she could see the purpose and the years of shinobi training behind it. Obviously, he was someone who had once been a ninja, but those days were long over. The man stopped in front of her almost as if he was gauging her. Greetings, Temari. I am Danzo, he told her. What can I do for you? Temari asked him neutrally. She had heard mention of this man, although not part of the council officially. He was supposed to have some major influence. Although beyond that, there wasn't much information they had found on him. I'm just seeing how things are going, Danzo said. The council just wants some assurances that there are no issues between you and Naruto. After all, this is a major event coming up for both our villages. Temari wasn't sure, but she thought she didn't like this man already. It wasn't that he was mean or nasty. In fact, he was trying to come off as pretty neutral in all of this. But there was one thing that she first noticed. He reminded her of her father. The way he stood there and how he talked, it was like seeing a ghost of her dead father in this man. Just because of that, she felt her guard go up. Men like this she knew she had to be careful of. They would come off as harmless, but hidden was a threat you didn't want unleashed on you. Now she was quickly trying to see just how much of those injuries were real, and what could be just an act. Even if they weren't an act to put others at ease, that didn't mean he wasn't dangerous. Things are going well, she told him. Thank you for asking. Danzo gave her a long look, his face totally expressionless, but she could tell he wasn't pleased with her response. Well, just remember what this marriage means. As a ninja, you know what duty is, and I would hate to think that Suna sent us a ninja that couldn't or even wouldn't live up to the agreement. Are you saying I'm not? Temari said with a hint of anger. I would never say such a thing, he told her. I am just an old man making conversation. Besides, you seem like a ninja that knows what duty is. You also seem to be the kind that knows what happens to those that fail their duty. Temari knew a veiled threat when she heard it. This man was definitely like her father, cold and manipulative and extremely dangerous. She could see how such a man held power. He didn't come at you up front, no, he came at you sideways or from behind. She would have to remember to be on her guard at all times with this man. She also felt that being on his bad side could be unpleasant as well. I know my duty, and the price of failure is due all Suna ninja, she told him, standing up straight. She could tell that any sign of weakness would be bad in this case. He was the type that could smell weakness and use it to his advantage. Ah, but you're not a Suna ninja anymore, are you? Danzo pointed out. But at any rate, your loyalty is to this village now, and I hope you remember that. Many eyes are on you, as you know how Suna already betrayed us once before. There are those that feel you can't be trusted. Temari knew that was coming, although she could hardly blame Konoha for any mistrust. They had broken the peace between them. There was no telling how many people had lost the lives of loved ones in that battle. I know the consequences if this alliance fails, Temari told him. I have no intention of putting Suna through a war with Konoha. Danzo seemed to consider her words. She wasn't saying that she was totally loyal to either village, but yet implying she wouldn't put her home at risk. Very well then, I can try and put the minds of the others at ease then. Danzo told her. He could help to smooth things over. Besides having her in his debt, even just a small one was worth having. I do hope that you are not disappointed in the match with Naruto. There was some debate on if you should actually be wed to him. Personally, I think he is perfect for this. Oh, this caught her off guard. She didn't expect him to approve of Naruto, not given his generation's attitude towards him. Oh yes, he's a very special case. In fact, I once petitioned the old Hokage to have the boy to be raised and trained, Danzo told her honestly. I could see the potential, but so much time was wasted. He could have been so much more than he is now, but I hear his progress has improved, thanks to some of your effort. He's surprising. That is until he opened the door while she had been changing. He hadn't seen anything, but she obviously thought he was a pervert now. He really just seemed to be having bad luck. He thought of flowers, so he got Ino's help in picking something nice with a meaning behind them that said how sorry he was. Turns out Temari was allergic to those types of flowers. She had been sneezing for hours with red puffy eyes and very annoyed with him for it. No matter what, it just seemed he kept messing up and he was seriously coming to the end of his rope. Another realization came to him in the past few days as well. He missed the things he did with Temari, the training they did together, how she would show him how to cook a few new dishes, how they would talk over meals and hang out. He even missed the dates too. Sure, they hadn't been together for that long. For someone like Naruto it was different though. He had lived alone and been alone for most of his life. To have someone in his life like this was better than he had thought. Now it was almost like how it was before and he hated it. The other thing he started to realize was that he was actually starting to like her. She didn't see him as the dead last, like most did. She actually saw something in him and tried to help him get stronger. Hell, He was stronger thanks to her, and he knew with her help he could get a lot stronger too. He also missed her smile. It happened only a few times, but it was a nice smile. He missed her laugh and how when they were alone she let her guard down a bit and was more relaxed. She was also the first person he had told his greatest secret to, and she accepted him for it. It felt so good to be accepted totally without hold that back. He wasn't sure when it had happened, but he knew now that he actually liked Temari. Sure, maybe not loved her, but she was one of his precious people and she was important to him now. He could definitely see himself eventually loving her, but at this rate not anytime soon, at least not until he could fix this. Which led to him sitting depressed at the Ichiraku ramen stand, instead of wolfing down the ramen like a starving man condemned to a death sentence. He was just slowly eating his food. Both Ayame and Tyuki knew something was seriously wrong with the boy. "What's wrong, Naruto-kun?" Ayame asked the boy that was like a little brother to her. Naruto gave a depressed sigh. "I keep trying to make up for something with Temari and I keep screwing things up." "Like what?" Tyuki asked, and when Naruto explained his attempts so far, both ramen stand workers flinched. "Ouch. Yeah, I can see why I haven't seen you two together here then. Dad, that's not nice." Ayame scolded her father for his bluntness. "Anyway, maybe you should try something new." "I'm afraid to try," Naruto said honestly. What if he tried and it blew up in his face again? Before Ayame could say a response, the familiar voices of two girls were heard. "I'm telling you, something is going on with Temari and Naruto." Forehead. Ino's voice could be heard. "Look, Ino pig, I know there is something off, but is it really that bad?" Sakura's voice was heard too. "Well, let's see if he's here and we can ask him," Ino said as both girls entered the stand. "Ah, there you are, Naruto. Oh man, you look like crap." "Ino." Sakura shouted at her and then looked at Naruto. He looked even more depressed than the last time she had seen him. She sat down next to her teammate and friend. "Naruto, is everything okay?" Naruto sighed and his head hit the counter as a depressed groan came from him. "He's having trouble making up with Temari," Ayame told the girls as it looked like Naruto was in no shape to tell them himself. By the end, both girls could see why Naruto was so depressed lately. The ideas had been good ones, but things just didn't go too well. Ino felt a bit bad with her choices of flowers. She hadn't known that Temari would be allergic to those types and felt bad in her part of it. Well, what got her so mad to begin with? Sakura asked, wondering how this all started. Naruto was about to say the reason until his survival instincts kicked in. She stiffened at the thought of what those two girls would do to him if they found out. Sakura hit pretty hard when mad, and he was sure Ino wasn't too far behind her either. He really didn't want both girls to think he had tried to take advantage of Temari or something. Also, if Temari found out he told anyone what had happened, if the girls didn't him, Temari would finish off what was left. It's kind of personal and embarrassing," Naruto blushed. It didn't help that ever since that incident sometimes he could catch himself staring at Temari when she wasn't looking. He could still remember what she looked like and the feel of her skin. "Naruto," Sakura said in a slightly angry voice. She could sense something. She wasn't sure what, but something was making her pervert sense going off. Ino's eyes narrowed as well as she felt something behind that as well. Naruto quickly sat up straight as he began to panic. Look, it really is personal, and Temari wouldn't want me talking about it. Can't you help me out of this at least?" Sakura and Ino shared a look. They decided they would drop this at least for now. Besides, for Ino, she had been helping Naruto with his bride-to-be. The hopeless romantic in her wanted to see the two blondes fall in love and have the happy ending that she always dreamed of having when she married. And it was no small wonder which dark-haired boy was the star in those fantasies either. Plus, how could she get Sasuke to be hers, if she couldn't help Naruto get the woman he was going to marry. Sakura just wanted to help her friend. Lately she and Naruto had gotten a lot closer. Maybe it was because he had stopped trying to gain her heart and had settled for just her friendship. She was actually glad to have Naruto as a friend lately, and she didn't like to see him like this. Plus she was sure that Temari wasn't happy, and the older girl was someone she was starting to consider a friend as well. Well, there are a few things that you can do. Sakura started off as both she and Ino told him all the things a girl liked to get for gifts. They went into jewelry, clothing, chocolates as well. Then they went into things like taking her out to dinner or some kind of major date to make up for whatever he had done. The girls told him anything they could think of, and Naruto tried to keep it all straight. Okay, thanks, Naruto said after the lessons on what girls might like. I think I'll go and see what I can find. Later, Naruto, Sakura called out to him. I hope he finds something. Yeah, Ino said, nodding. Hey, how about we invite Temari out with the other girls? I mean, we hardly know her other than you, and I bet she must be a bit lonely in a village full of strangers. That sounds like a good idea. Sakura smiled at the thought. I'll ask her tomorrow. Later, Naruto wasn't sure what to do. Sure, Sakura and Ino had given him some ideas, but honestly, what was he to get Temari? So far everything else had blown up in his face, and he didn't know anything like dress size or ring size for jewelry. Plus he wasn't sure Temari even liked that stuff. She didn't really wear or have much of that stuff like jewelry. The only thing she carried around was her huge battle fan. He thought that maybe a new weapon would help him out. He paused at that thought. She didn't have anything for close combat other than the standard kunai and shuriken, but what if he could find something really cool for her to use? Naruto got a huge grin as he went looking for a weapons store. Ever since the Chunin exams, a few more stores had actually been kinder to him, so lately he had been experimenting with looking into new stores. Sure, the ones that had always accepted him were good, but he had been too afraid to shop around in fear of being kicked out. He soon found a weapons store that he had seen but never gone into before, mainly cause the weapons looked kind of expensive. But with all the new money he might be able to afford some new gear. In fact, he made a mental note to buy better quality equipment when he could. He walked in seeing a store filled with weapons. There were everything from swords to daggers, axes, which he thought was weird for ninja, and a few weapons he couldn't even name. Naruto looked through it all and was amazed at the things he saw. Sorry to keep you waiting, a female voice called out. I was in the back helping out, how can I? Naruto. Naruto looked at the counter to see a surprised Tenten there. Hey, do you work here? Yeah. Tenten smiled at seeing him. Well, I sometimes work here. When my team isn't on missions, I help out, and since Lee is still recovering, I have more time to spend here. How is he doing? Naruto wondered about Lee. He's doing great, Tenten beamed. Tsunade-sama healed him up and he'll continue being a ninja again. She's just the greatest there is. Yeah, Ba-chan is pretty great. Naruto. Tenten shouted suddenly. Don't call the Hokage that. Why not? Naruto asked her as if it was perfectly natural to call her that. I mean, she's 50 and hides behind that genjutsu of hers. Still, you should show some respect to her, Tenten muttered. She idolized Tsunade. She wanted to be a lot like her, and she just didn't know how Naruto managed to get away with that kind of stuff. She sighed and went to why he was here. So are you here for new weapons? Yeah, I was hoping you could help me out. Naruto then told her who he was looking a weapon for. He didn't go into major detail, just that he was looking for a present for Temari, and a close-range weapon would be perfect for her. Tenten had to admit that to her, that was a very nice gift, but then again she thought any good weapon was a good gift. She thought about what type of weapons she had for someone like Temari, having first-hand knowledge of how the girl fought. Although she still felt embarrassed to how badly she had lost, she still was looking for ways to improve since then. So Tenten showed Naruto all the types of weapons that Temari might like and could use. At first Naruto wasn't sure what Temari would like and went with what Tenten showed him. Then he found something that caught his eye and asked Tenten to show him. She went into detail about the weapon and already Naruto could tell that Temari would love it. The only downside was the cost. It was going to put a cramp in his savings and his wallet would take a major hit, but it would be worth it if this would work. In fact, if this didn't get him out of trouble, then he wasn't sure what was. Hokage Tower. Anko wasn't sure why she had been called into the tower, only that she was to report to room 218. This was odd because as far as she knew that was part of the research part of the tower. A slim hope took hold that maybe Kakashi had come up with something for her seal. Ever since she had started to help Kakashi with this, she had been hoping for something to keep the curse seal in check. She hated when the seal acted up, like when she had certain nightmares or like in the forest of death. She had been so weak and helpless, she should be dead now, but only because Orochimaru, in some sick pleasure he got, left her alive. She started to think a bit more about Kakashi as well. She didn't really know him all that well. In fact, most of what she knew came from other sources like Guy, Kurenai and Asuma. Even then, they didn't know much, which left Anko a puzzle, and she hated puzzles. Mainly because she hated missing pieces, like her memories, and blank pieces of information only pissed her off, plus he was hard to figure out as well. You couldn't tell what he was thinking or feeling since he not only wore a mask, but also seemed to mask his emotions too. It was a little irritating at times because she wasn't sure what was an act and what was real with the guy. But she did know one thing: he had earned his reputation. She once snuck a peek at his files that she was cleared to see, and she was surprised by what she saw. The list of moves and jutsus he knew was staggering, and then there was his mission success rate. It was better than her own success rate, and she hated not being on top in anything. Although as they talked about her seal, eventually they moved to other things as they spent some time together. She learned how he had actually stood up to Orochimaru while he had put that counter seal on Sasuke, that in her books either mean that Kakashi was very brave or really stupid. Maybe a bit of both, but then again she couldn't say any different about herself. She got to the room, and when she entered she found not only Kakashi leaning over a table, but she saw Jiraiya himself there as well. She had only seen him a few times and never really met the man, but she knew his reputation, or more like reputations if you counted his non-ninja exploits. Kakashi noticed her first and gave her that strange eye smile of his. "Hey there, Anko, there is something we want you to see." "Ah, so this is the young thing you've been hiding away with." Jiraiya gave a perverted grin at Anko. "You have good tastes, Kakashi. How would you like to a model for a new character I've been working on for a new book?" Jiraiya asked. Anko gave him a sultry look as she swayed her hips to Jiraiya. She moved like a snake towards the man whose face was masked with surprise but quickly turned to his most perverted grin. Kakashi blinked in surprise as well as he couldn't take his eye off her movements. He didn't know that Anko could move like that. "Well, I would have to say," Anko said in a husky voice, and then pulled out a kunai to the man's throat. "That if you don't keep your little brain out of this, I'll cut it off and give it to Tsunade-sama as a trophy." Point taken, point taken. Jiraiya moved slightly away and glared at Kakashi, who was chuckling. "So, what's all this?" Anko asked, looking at the table. On it were many different pieces of paper with many different designs on them. It took her a moment to see that they were all different seal designs. "We think we may have found a new, stronger seal to use," Kakashi told her, pulling one sheet forward. Jiraiya nodded. "Yes, using Kakashi's previous method as a template, I've put my own knowledge into it." Now it should work a bit better, although this won't completely seal it, and if you ever did try to use the curse mark, this seal would be totally useless. Hey, I'll take what I can get. Anko grinned at the image on the paper. She tried making sense of it, but it was way beyond her. She knew seals, but nothing this advanced, although something odd was about it. Hey, how does this thing work exactly? A person sits in the center of the seal, Kakashi told her, pointing it out on the paper. It's pretty much the same, only the design is more complex. So I just sit in the center or what? She asked and noticed Kakashi got a little nervous for some reason. Not exactly. You need to be, as the seals are drawn onto your body. Jiraiya giggled. What? Anko turned to the old pervert and then Kakashi. You don't have to be, Kakashi quickly said. At least, not totally. I had to draw on the seal on Sasuke's upper body. Anko gave the masked man a hard look, not sure what to think about this. Sure, she was willing to put some kind of damn leash on this seal on her neck, but being topless as someone draws on her wasn't what she had in mind. Okay, so maybe that sounded fun in another context, but not in this. Well, I would be more than happy to help out. Jiraiya grinned at her, only to be met by a fist to the face. He fell onto his back, holding his hands to his face. Not likely, Anko said coldly. Then she looked at Kakashi and sighed. If this what it was going to take, she would have to do it, but she was going to get compensated for it. Alright, Kakashi, just name the time and place, but if you're going to see me topless, then you'll have to do something for me to make it fair. Like what? Kakashi asked, wondering what she had in mind. Now where is the fun in that? Anko grinned at him and walked out the door, leaving both men to stare at the closed door. My boy, Jiraiya said slowly, getting up. I don't know if I envy you or not now. Although Jiraiya did know was that he seemed to have stumbled upon a new side story for his new book. If the things he caught Naruto and Temari doing helped out, then this little thing with Kakashi and Anko would be a nice companion piece to it. He was already thinking of all the things he could do with them, maybe the mysterious masked man and the snake charmer woman as characters. He quickly pulled out his notes and started to write these ideas down. Uzumaki home. Temari was not having a good day, actually make that a good week. First there was the shower incident, then that meeting with Danzo had put her on edge. Then there were Naruto's attempts to apologize, which ended up blowing up in her face. She was just thankful that she didn't get a rash from those flowers on top of everything else she got from them. She was currently thinking just forgiving him, since his making things up to her were turning out to be disasters. A part of her was actually afraid of what he would do next. She sighed as she went up to her room. So far it looked like Naruto wasn't home yet. That would give her time to unwind, and then she could think about just saying that things were fine between them and moving on. Besides, it had been a few days since the incident and she had cooled down since then. It was still embarrassing to just think about, but the rational part of her mind knew that sooner or later he would see her. That meeting with Danzo had started her thinking on things. She was expected to produce at least one child at some point, which meant that she and Naruto needed to get closer. At least things had been going well and he was a nice guy, at least he had never forced the issue of. She knew that a lesser man, if they had found her in that position, might not have pulled away. She crossed her arms across her chest at that thought. Being a ninja was a dangerous job, but a female ninja held other things to worry about. A captured kunoichi didn't just have torture to worry about, for starters. At least with Naruto she knew that he would never force her into anything. She sat on her bed thinking about things. The wedding was coming up soon, and although she was comfortable around him, what did she feel for him? She started to list the things about him, both the good and the bad, and in the end the good points seemed to have won out. Logically she knew that he was a good match, and most likely would be a good husband and father one day. He liked kids, provided she made sure he didn't teach them anything perverted, and he was loyal and very honorable. But although her mind was made up, what did her heart say? It was then that she noticed a box on her dresser and she groaned. She really was worried what was inside of it. Might as well get it over with, Temari thought as she went up to open the box. It was a bit heavier than she thought for something that size. When she opened it up and was actually surprised by what she found. She pulled out a twin pair of fans. They were a good length, black with a yellow floral pattern on them. Temari was interested and opened one of the fans up. It was then she found out why they were so heavier than normal, as the fan was all metal. The edges looked razor sharp and the metal very durable. The metal glistened and she examined it closely. It was a very good quality. She noticed something else in the box, a small note that only read the word, "sorry," on it. She couldn't help but smirk. That was just like Naruto to write something so simple. She also noticed that there was something odd about the metal. It wasn't a normal metal. Having a similar fan for years, she knew metal that was made to conduct chakra by feel at this point. She took the two fans and quickly went down to the small training area in the backyard. Temari flicked her wrists and opened up the fans, testing the weight. They were excellently balanced, but it would take time to get used to them. She went into a few fluid movements with her fans and body. There were a few things she could do with these that she couldn't pull off with her larger fan. Her mind was already going through all the different types of things she could train in with these fans. She was a long-distance fighter, but her biggest weakness had been someone getting in closer to her. Now with these she had that covered. Temari never really got giddy, but she was as close as she could come with these. They were perfect for her. Now it was time to test the chakra, and with one fan she infused her wind chakra into it. She concentrated, feeling how the weapon took and molded it. It would take time to get used to that, but it felt right. Then when it felt right, she slashed out with her fan and released the chakra. A wave of condensed wind flew out to the target and left a scratch against the surface. Normally that kind of attack would cut it in half, but with time and training she could definitely use these. Okay. Apology accepted, Temari said, placing the fans in her belt as she turned around to see Naruto there. Why, you knew I was here? Naruto asked, a little nervous. At least for a few minutes, she smirked as she walked over to him. Were these your idea? Yeah. I was thinking what you would like, and when I saw them I figured you might. Naruto scratched the back of his head. Plus you told me that your fan wasn't good for close combat and these looked perfect for you. Temari smiled honestly as she looked at him, thinking back on her earlier thoughts. Okay, he wasn't drop-dead handsome, but he was cute and the whiskers looked nice on him. Naruto, can we go inside to talk about something? She asked him. He blinked in sudden confusion but nodded. They ended up on the couch sitting next to each other, and she noticed how he seemed a little nervous. In fact, during the dates they had, he had been nervous around her when they were close at times. She should have known. He had been alone most of his life, so he wasn't used to close contact. Thinking about that made her feel sad about that. He didn't deserve that kind of loneliness. Naruto, as you know, there are a few expectations for our marriage. You mean that we're basically closing the deal on the new piece? Naruto asked her. Well, there is that, Temari said as a small blush started to form to where she was going. But in these kinds of marriages, to prove our commitment, a few things have to happen. One of them is that I have to have at least one child. Naruto swallowed nervously at that. I remember you saying something about kids a couple of times. Temari nodded. Yeah, that's because I knew we would have at least one, and remember, no perverted jutsus. She gave him a small glare for measure and he quickly nodded his head so fast, it looked like it would fall off. Satisfied, she decided to go on with her explanation. She told him about her run-in with Danzo. Naruto had no idea who that was as he had never seen anyone like that before. He was confused to hear that this guy had wanted to take him in and train him at an early age. At first he would have liked that idea, but then Temari told him the other side of things, how the man reminded her of her father and the subtle threats he had given her. She could see the anger there and she was a bit pleased that he would want to protect her. Bastard isn't getting any kids from us, Naruto muttered, crossing his arms. He made a mental note to ask Tsunade about him the next time he saw her. So, we have to have a kid. Not yet, Temari told him. I don't plan on getting pregnant at least until after I'm a chunin, and besides I think we're both a bit young. But there is a timetable for this, and eventually they'll push us into it. Naruto looked down at that. He didn't like the idea of Temari being forced to be with him, and the fact that she would be forced to have a kid with him made him feel even worse. He always had hoped he would find love and a normal marriage and family. I don't want you to do anything you don't want to, Naruto said a bit sadly. Temari looked at him and her expression softened as she gently took his hand. Naruto was surprised as he looked up at the other blonde. I know, you're a nice guy and well, lately I've been thinking about us. I know that I could have done a lot worse than you, in fact you're a good catch. Really? Temari nodded and Naruto blushed a bit at this. He looked down a bit and maybe for the first time he had some hope for a real marriage. Well, I wasn't sure at first, but I'm kind of glad you're going to be my wife too. Now it was Temari's turn to start blushing as well. Thanks, Temari told him. Although since we're going to be married I've been thinking that we should try and get closer. I don't want us to be this awkward all the time, and then there is another thing that we are required to do. Oh, what? Naruto gave her that look when he closed his eyes, making him look more fox-like. Well, we will have to, the wedding night. She told him, blushing a lot more now. What happens on a wedding night? Naruto asked her and Temari nearly fell over from that. You mean you don't know? Temari asked and he shook his head. Temari sighed at this. She should have known that without parents he would be missing a few things, but this was not what she expected. Naruto, on the wedding night the couple consummate the marriage. Consummate what? Naruto asked. We have, Temari said, looking away to hide her huge blush, and Naruto had an equal one on his face at that. Naruto was starting to sweat at the thought of that night, but then again his mind went back to her form. The thought of him on top of her equally in bed made him feel all funny inside. He also noticed he was starting to get an erection and quickly tried to think of something else. He didn't want her to see that and think him some kind of pervert. So that's why you want us to try and be closer? Naruto asked nervously. Temari cleared her throat and nodded. Yes, I don't want us to be too embarrassed to do anything on that night. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea to me. Naruto was glad the wedding was still 2 months away. Things were moving fast enough as they were. The last thing he needed to do was screw up a night like that. It was supposed to be important, but he had no idea what to do for that night. He started to wonder who he could ask for advice. He was too embarrassed to go to someone like Tsunade, plus she might punch him for being a pervert. There was no way he could ask one of the other girls for the same reason. Maybe he could ask Haruka. He might know, plus he wasn't a pervert like Jiraiya. I'm not saying we should just jump into things, but I think we should at least start off with something simple. She felt a little nervous with what she had thought of to try. Simple. Orochimaru was resting. He had been forced to change into a new body since Sasuke wasn't able to leave the village until that wedding for his teammate was done with. The new body would have to do. Although it was strong, it wasn't as strong as he had hoped. He was also starting on the enhancements to this new body as well, altering it to fit his needs. The bandages were to cover the surgeries that the body had been put through. they were standard by now, and every time he thought of new ways to improve the procedures. But there was another problem: he would need Sasuke at some point, and from the reports of the Sound 4, he seemed to be training with the curse mark. He had plenty of time to think now. While his new body recovered, it would be a few years before he needed to change hosts. Without the constant pain in his body, he finally could start thinking more clearly. In a few years Sasuke would be older and stronger. He had only gotten after him because he had gotten too excited. After all, with only 2 true Sharingan users left in the world, and his failure with Itachi, there had only been one person left. After he tested the boy out and seen his potential, he had marked him. He literally just couldn't wait. That had been a mistake, but the Sharingan had been so close after all these years. But he needed to be patient and smart now. Now he needed to be crafty and manipulative. He thought about the boy. It was obvious that he wanted power to his older brother. That was something he could use, but the boy would need to be pushed a bit more into his direction. There was also another problem, and that was the Sound 4. They couldn't wait forever in Konoha. Orochimaru knew all the secret ways in and out of the village and knew all about how Konoha trained their Anbu units. But they couldn't hide forever. Sooner or later they would be caught, and he couldn't have them caught. He would have to recall them for now, but he would have his people on the watch for Sasuke. Besides, he had a few plans on how to make sure that Sasuke joined him, but he needed more information first. Maybe when the boy started to leave the village on missions again, he could get him then. But at any rate, he would watch and wait. Temari. It had been a few days since she had that talk with Naruto about their relationship, and they were making progress on it. They could hold hands and kiss every now and then. They were slowly getting used to being physical with each other. It was a little odd with him being shorter than her, and of course both weren't too sure what to even do in a relationship, but they were slowly making progress. Plus, despite everything, she found herself actually enjoying it. He was a quick learner and he could give really good kisses apparently. Sometimes she would catch herself just looking at him, watching him with his antics with Sasuke or someone. How hard he trained and the fierce determination he showed, he could be very passionate at those times. Although she did wish he would put a bit of that passion into their relationship. That was another thing. She had stopped thinking of this as the arrangement into a relationship. Why not? After all, they went on dates, lived and worked together. She saw him all the time and she liked being with him. She felt at ease with him around, and yet also she felt other things. Frustration when he was stubborn, she sighed when he was being stupid, smiled when he was acting all goofy, although she tried to hide it at times, and many other things. But she too it all, the bad with the good, and it just felt right with her. Although at the moment she wouldn't mind being with him at the moment, but she couldn't. This was mainly due to the fact that Sakura had asked her to hang out with her friends today. Temari knew she could have just said no, but in all honesty she was feeling a little isolated. Sure, she felt the same back home, but Konoha was still not totally her home yet. Plus, Sakura wasn't all bad. She had potential, she just needed to get her fixation off the Uchiha and train seriously, and the girl could go far. The current extra training she did with the pink-haired girl was evidence of that, plus the girl was nice enough to her and it was hard to get people being nice to her. She didn't have many female friends, if any, back home because of her standing in Gaara. So she agreed to it. Plus, Naruto had been telling her she needed to make friends with all of his friends anyway, so this would get him off her back about it. He could be very annoying at times when he really wanted something to happen. So that was how she ended up sitting at a table with nothing but the other girls that Naruto knew. Temari already knew Sakura, and she knew Tenten, although not in the really friendly manner. After all, getting your handed to you in the Chunin exams wasn't the best way to leave an impression. But the girl seemed to be over it, so that was good. There was also the Ino girl that Sakura talked about. Temari wasn't sure, but the other blonde girl seemed just as bad as Sakura when it came to a certain Uchiha. Then finally there was the quiet mouse of a girl, Hinata Hyuga. She remembered her as well in the exams, fighting that older boy that she later learned was her own cousin. It was odd, back then he had nearly the girl, but now it would seem that was just water under the bridge. From what Naruto had said once, after he beat Neji he must have pounded some sense into the boy. He acted a lot nicer than he had before, although Temari had met him only a few times. If that was nicer, she wondered how bad had he been before. Apparently Naruto had another gift, to literally pound the sense into people. It worked with Neji and her brother at least. But at any rate she was starting to feel a bit more comfortable with the girls as they talked. They were at a nice little tea shop drinking at a table outside in the nice sunny weather. I can't believe that Naruto of all people is getting married, Ino sighed as they were in the middle of drinking their teas. I mean, I never thought he would be the first to get married. Oh, Temari said, not sure how to take that remark. Ino realized the tone of voice the older girl was using. I didn't mean anything by it, it's just that he was never that popular with girls, plus his crush with Sakura as well. That earned her a slight kick under the table from said pink-haired ninja. What? You know it's true, Ino said to Sakura. Well, I'm not going to be left out. As soon as Sasuke-kun is all mine, then I'll marry him as soon as I can. Fat chance of that happening. Sakura glared at her friend, rival who mirrored her back. Temari rolled her eyes and looked as the other two girls. Honestly, what the hell does everyone see in that Uchiha boy anyway? No idea, Tenten said with a shrug. She never really thought much of the Sasuke. Yes, he was a strong genin, but he just wasn't her type. It was like he looked down on everyone just because of what clan he came from. Plus the boy always seemed to have too much ego. Then again, she had only met him a few times. Sure, he was a pretty face, but she just didn't like his personality. Hinata just shrugged herself. She always felt intimidated by the last Uchiha clan member, to be honest. Well, he's handsome, Ino said, counting off with her fingers. He's from an established clan. He's got such a dark past with what happened. He's rich, powerful, he's cool, he's the strongest genin in the village too. I can debate that, Temari told her. What? You think you're better? Ino challenged. Not sure, but I know there is someone stronger, and that's Naruto, Temari said plainly. The entire table looked at her, shocked with surprise at this. Then Ino burst out laughing. Naruto had been the dead last at the academy. The thought of him being stronger than Sasuke, who was a prodigy and top genin of their class, was just too funny. Temari, however, didn't like the way the girl laughed at Naruto like that. Naruto. Ino finally managed to get out. Okay, I'll admit that he's gotten stronger. After all, I saw that mock with Neji and he really pulled out an upset win with that one. But come on, there's no way he's stronger than Sasuke-kun. Please, Temari said. I watched that fight he had with my brother after all hell broke loose. Everyone knows that it was Naruto that beat him. Hell, it's public record, I bet by now, as it's well known in my village. I saw your precious Uchiha fight my little brother and couldn't even scratch him, but Naruto, well, he never gave up. Temari relaxed a bit as she started to think back to that day. I've been in many battles and I've seen the kinds of terrible things my little brother can do. But that is a day I'll never forget. The things I saw in that fight I know I'll never see again. The kind of fight they had was something that you only hear in stories or legends. I remember my heart racing just watching them slug it out, and I'll admit. Back then I never thought much of him, but when I saw him fighting with everything he had, I saw that there was a lot more than meets the eye with him. Trust me, if you saw what I saw, you wouldn't say those things about Naruto. Temari said, giving the girl a steeled look. Ino blinked a few times, not sure what to think about that. Temari looked very serious, but in her mind she just couldn't wrap her head around the fact that Naruto of all people was supposed to be stronger than Sasuke. Naruto-kun has always been brave and strong, Hinata finally spoke up. She was glad that someone else saw what she saw in Naruto. Although she was still envious of Temari to be marrying Naruto, it still hurt how she now never had a chance with the boy that had captured her heart, but it was more manageable now. I haven't known him that long, but even I thought he didn't stand a chance against Neji, Tenten said, adding in her 2 cents. I mean, I've seen Neji in action and he had to go all out on Naruto, even resorting to rotation which he was saving up for later. Then when I thought he had lost, he comes out of nowhere and Neji is down for the count. Yeah, Temari chuckled at that. Never saw that coming, but it seems that's his specialty. You can never know what he's going to do next. She fingered one of her new smaller fans that were tucked at her waist. She smiled a bit as her finger glided over the gift. I don't know who is actually stronger, Sakura said softly. I wasn't awake during that fight, but Naruto has gotten a lot stronger, even more than I thought. It was something that Sakura had come to admit in recent weeks. Naruto had far surpassed her and was showing no signs of slowing down either. She felt like she was being left behind and had to work so hard to just keep them in sight. Sakura, Ino asked, shocked that her friend would admit to something like that. What makes you say something like that? You always hated him and said he was weak. Sakura actually flinched at that. She had started to feel bad about the way she had treated Naruto in the past. He was a good friend and she felt horrible about all the times she had been mean to him. I was wrong, she said, looking down at her teacup. And I never really hated him, he was just annoying at the time and I never let myself get the chance to get to know him. But after the Chunin exams, I guess I started to grow up and I don't think of him like that anymore. He's a really good friend who will always be there for you no matter what, and he is strong. Temari smiled at that. She wasn't sure how to feel about the girl hearing how she used to be. But people can change for the better. Her brother was proof of that. It seems that Naruto changes everyone for the better. Temari thought to herself. He changed Neji apparently, he changed Gaara, and he changed Sakura. Maybe he's even doing the same to me. Well, how much stronger could he be? Tenten asked, getting a bit more curious now. Well, let's see. Temari leaned back, thinking about it. He's already learned a powerful jutsu from Jiraiya the Toad Sage. The Rasengan, which was created by your fourth Hokage himself, and only like 3 people even know it in the world. He's also working on his wind nature manipulation and he's starting to make some progress. This progress, of course, was Naruto using clones to try and cut rocks up with his chakra. She had caught him using 10 clones with the rocks, and when she asked what he was doing, she was surprised by the answer. She had never heard of anyone training with shadow clones before. Although she didn't know the jutsu herself, there had to be a reason she had never heard of people training this way before. Ino, Tenten and Hinata sat there, surprise written on their faces. They hadn't known anything like that, but Hinata soon smiled, knowing that Naruto had hidden strength and now it was showing through. She only hoped to one day match that. I've seen some of that too, Sakura said to the others, just in case. Although I wish he had a different summons. He can summon too. Tenten hadn't known that. Frogs, Sakura groaned, remembering how Naruto had called up a strange little red one in a blue vest. Actually, they're toads, Temari corrected. She had said the same thing and apparently the toad had took offense to it. At any rate, he's a lot stronger than you think. Well, sounds like it. Tenten had to admit that was an impressive list and a bit diverse. She was a weapons specialist, but she was starting to think maybe a little practice in another area wouldn't hurt as a backup. At any rate, what's he like? I mean, how are things going between you two? Temari blushed a bit and tried to keep a smile off her face, but a bit showed through. He's actually a really sweet guy. I could have done a hell of a lot worse than him. Sure, he needs a little work, but no man is perfect. Hopefully you can get him out of that orange suit, Ino sighed. God, how has he not been in that ugly thing? I have no idea. Temari rolled her eyes. Trust me, I've been trying, but he can be very stubborn at times. Hopefully I can slowly get him off so much orange, but I get the feeling he'll fight me on this one. Never did understand his fixation on that color, Sakura sighed. Hopefully you can, or at least get him something better, maybe mix it in with a darker color at least. Well, how about the good stuff? Ino asked. Come on, girl. We need details. Have you two kissed yet, and is he a good kisser or a bad one? Temari flushed at that, seeing all pairs of eyes now glued to her. She could tell them it was none of their business, but for some reason she felt that maybe they should know exactly what Naruto was like. After all, they should know just what they missed out on. Alright, fine. He's a really good kisser and he's only getting better. Plus he gives the best foot and shoulder rubs. He rubs your shoulders and feet. Hinata blushed at the thought of such intimate contact with Naruto. She would have fainted if he tried to do something like that. At the same time too, Temari grinned at the memory. In fact, she kind of looked forward to those moments. She could just really relax at those times with Naruto. I'll admit he really uses shadow clones in inventive ways. The other girls were surprised by this, and maybe a slight bit jealous of the happy look on Temari's face. After all, she was the only one of them that actually had someone like that in her life. So then, how is the wedding plans going? Ino asked, trying to move the subject along. She hated long silences and needed something to break the moment. It's going, although a few details need working out, Temari said. Need to get a few things, like flowers for the damn thing. Well, my family owns a flower store, we could help with that, Ino said, glad to help out. After all, this wedding had been the talk of the town for a while now. Well, that's one thing out of the way. Temari mentally ticked that one off. Then she remembered something else she needed. Sakura, I need a maid of honor, would you like it? Me. Well, I don't have many female friends, she told her, but in truth she really didn't have any female friends. Sakura was the closest she had to a good enough friend for this. Plus she wasn't sure who else to ask for this. I would love to. Sakura's eyes nearly had stars in them at this. She would love to be a part of this. Already her mind was thinking of what dress to get and how to get her hair for the day. Ah, no fair. Ino said. Sorry, Ino pig, but she picked me. Sakura grinned at her friend. So you need any other things to help out? Tenten asked the older girl. I mean, we might as well help you out with planning this thing if you need it. We can't do everything, but we can at least do this since Naruto is our friend. Temari smiled, happy to have the help. Although the place was already picked out to be on top of the Hokage Tower, she and all of that was being planned out. She still needed to think on a few things, like guests. So far the only people she was inviting was her family and her old sensei. Of course the Suna Council would be there, as would all the important people in Konoha. But so far the ceremony wouldn't be totally traditional. Which was a good point, and there would be a few changes. Such as her making an oath of always obeying the husband. Like in some ceremonies, she liked Naruto, but in no way could she give up her pride for something like that. It would be a true partnership for their marriage and not one of submissive servitude. She snapped back as someone asked her a question on if she knew a place to get a good kimono. Underground area, Konoha. Anko had been told that the new ceiling preparations were complete and she couldn't wait. Although she was moving in the more secure areas, the older underground areas where she has stayed when they had found her and they had interrogated her. She was glad they didn't go through the physical torture part for missing Nins, but still they had used all the tricks to break her down. She did break, of course, but she couldn't tell them what she didn't know. After a couple of weeks she was reinstated but given 2 weeks recovery leave. That had been a rough time for her, but she didn't blame them. Hell, a part of her had hoped they could have unlocked her mind with what she went through. All in all, she had gotten stronger from it, and now she was heading back into this place. The cold stone echoed with her footsteps and she found the room that Kakashi had told her to find. She opened up and looked inside. The place was dark with candles as the only light source, but she was interested in the designs that were all over the place. There was a complex one on the floor and many others that led from it going all over the place. Damn, Anko muttered at the level of detail that had to go into this. This had to take forever. Actually more like 5 hours, Kakashi said, stepping out from behind a pillar with some ink. He looked a little tired to her, and if he had been at this for 5 hours it was no wonder. So you think this will work? Anko asked, looking around. Well, it's a lot more advanced and complicated than the one I used on Sasuke, that's for sure, Kakashi said, looking around himself. But we won't know until we try. Anko sighed. Alright, let's get this over with. She removed her coat and laid it out off to the side. She was about to start with her mesh shirt but looked at Kakashi. Aren't you forgetting something? If I have to do this topless, then so are you. Kakashi rolled his visible eye and took off his jacket and then his long-sleeve shirt. He placed them off to the side only to see Anko watching her with a smirk on her face. Happy? Not yet. You forgot the mask. I'm not letting you see me nearly unless I get to see that face of yours. Kakashi paused for a moment and pulled off his mask. Honestly, what was it with people trying to see his face? Anko had been watching Kakashi take his shirt off and she had to admit he had a really nice body under all that clothing. You couldn't tell because it wasn't skin tight, but his body was slim but athletic, kind of like a swimmer's body. All lean and powerful like a cat. She noticed the Anbu tattoo on his shoulder, and the little scars from the trade as well. Then he removed his mask and her brain shut down for a moment. She was amazed by what she saw. He was without a doubt one of the most handsome men she had ever seen. His face was perfect. Strong jawline, the perfect mouth and features. Even the scar on her face that she could see seemed to fit with his face. She couldn't understand why he chose to hide a face like that from the world. Then again, if all the women in the village could see that face, he wouldn't get a moment's peace. She wasn't even aware of her cheeks burning slightly from her staring at him. Anko? Kakashi asked, snapping her out of it. She felt embarrassed that he had caught her gawking like some stupid teenager. She turned around to hide her face and to compose herself. She berated herself for acting like that and for being caught. She was a professional and here she was acting like this. Kakashi watched her reaction with interest. He never did see why women acted like that when they saw his face. One of the reasons he kept his mask up all the time. He watched her remove her mesh shirt, leaving her in a bra. He couldn't help but look at her back. He noticed a couple of little scars, but otherwise her skin was flawless. Then she slowly took off her bra and Kakashi suddenly felt his heart rate increase a bit. He suddenly started to become painfully aware of just how long it had been since he had been with a woman. He had a few flings but nothing major. He didn't try to form bonds for the longest time. After his teammates and best friends died and then his sensei, he had lost everyone and retreated into himself. It was a long time before he had opened up again, but still he kept any UAL relationships to a minimum. Usually when he was out of the village after a mission was completed, so there would be no attachments, but that had been a very long time ago. Being with his genin team didn't really leave lots of free time like it used to. Then Anko turned around and he couldn't help but look. Her stomach was flat and slim, her s were very nice as well. Not overly large like Tsunade, but they were a handful. They looked a bit firm and supple, but he couldn't tell unless he could feel them. He quickly recovered and led Anko to the center of the circle where he started to apply the last of the special ink. Anko shivered a bit. It was cold down here and the ink was cold as well. She tried to focus on something else, but it was boring and she hated being bored. So, seen any interesting movies lately? It sounded even more lame coming out of her mouth than in her head. Kakashi chuckled, knowing what she was doing. He didn't mind the conversation. Not lately. Been very busy with my new team, plus the Ika Ika movie is still being made. They haven't picked a main star yet either. You really do like those books, huh? Of course, they're full of action, drama, suspense, porn. She supplied. Well, there are certain adult scenes, yes. Any 3 ways? Kakashi blinked. A couple. Why? Then it's porn and not adult scenes, as you put it. Besides, how many times does that actually happen in real life? She asked him, smirking. I'll admit that it's unlikely, but then again it is fiction, Kakashi told her as he started on the symbols going down her spine. You know, we've worked together a few times, but we haven't really ever talked before this, have we? Anko thought about it. Before he came to her about the new seal idea of his, they hardly ever interacted. No, not really. Why is that? Kakashi shrugged, even though she couldn't see it. Not sure myself. I think this is the most we've spoken outside of a mission. You know, I don't even know what you like other than Dango and scaring little Genins. She looked over her shoulder and grinned at him. Was a certain little blonde Genin talking about me? Kakashi chuckled. Oh yes, he ranted about a crazy proctor lady once. You certainly left an impression on him. Anko laughed at that. Well, then maybe I should crash his wedding and surprise him. Although I doubt that would go over well with everyone there. I could invite you if you want. Really? She was surprised at that. Of course, I am his sensei and I could ask to bring a few friends, he told her, smiling, and she could see how he smiled without the mask for once. He did close his eye, but the smile he had was a very nice one. She quickly turned her face forward before she blushed again. So, we're friends now? She asked. Kakashi paused. We're, if you'd like. Besides, I don't have any female friends that would let me draw on them. Anko wanted to smack his arm for that one, but she knew she couldn't move. Oh, I'll get you for that one, Hataki, but her voice held no malice in it. And for the record, I don't just let any friend do this. Then I'm honored. You better be. Anko smiled. He chuckled as he continued on drawing on her. They continued to talk and they were surprised how easy it was to talk to one another. Kakashi was surprised when he found out that her hobby was tea ceremonies. He never thought of her to be into something like that, but she apparently knew a lot about it. She learned that he had a few hobbies other than his books, and laughed when she heard that one of them was getting under Guy's skin. They both tried to continue on when Kakashi moved to her front, but it wasn't that easy. Anko had to admit that it was all kind of erotic and was glad that the cold was why her nipples were hard. The last thing she needed was for Kakashi to think she was turned on by all of this. Although she couldn't help but stare at his body and face now and then. He was a very good specimen of the male species, and it had been a long time since she got herself laid. You can only go so long without and only a certain amount of things you could do to take your mind off it. It certainly didn't help to have a hot man doing what he was doing on her skin. She just tried to focus her mind off things. Little did she know that Kakashi was having the same problem as her. Drawing the symbols on her front was very distracting, especially when he got to her S. He just hoped that he could get through this. He already was trying to think of other things so he wouldn't get an erection. Guy in a swimsuit usually worked to ruin the mood, but it was torture at any rate. By the time he was done, both of them were glad for it. Okay, here comes the hard part. Kakashi said, getting behind her. It's going to hurt, isn't it? Anko said, as more of a statement than a question as she steeled herself. Well, Sasuke did pass out, he warned her. Please, like I'm some rookie genin. Anko felt a bit insulted by the comparison. True, but this is a more complex one, so I have no idea what the effect will be on both of us, he told her, going through the hand seals. There was no more talking as Anko got ready for it. Then she felt his hand on her curse mark, and suddenly it was like every nerve in her body was on fire. She gritted her teeth, not wanting to cry out from the pain, but it was almost as bad as when she first got the mark. She didn't feel her nails digging into the palms of her hands or notice anything else. All there was the burning pain. She heard a scream, not knowing it was her own voice, and then the world went black. Naruto. It was mid-afternoon and Naruto was making his way to the academy again to see Iruka. He had been thinking about a few things lately and he was hoping he could catch Iruka before he left for the day. He wasn't sure how long the talk would be, so he figured after classes would work. Besides, he knew that Iruka stayed behind a bit to do some work after classes, so it was a good chance he was there. By the time he got inside the school, it was all quiet, everyone seemed to be gone for the day. He looked inside his old classroom and smiled, seeing Iruka there at his desk grading some papers by the looks of it. Hey Iruka-sensei, Naruto said, walking into the room. Naruto, how are things? Iruka asked, glad to see his favorite student. He could use the break anyway, plus he didn't get much time to see Naruto anymore. Things are going great, Naruto said, sitting across from him in an empty chair. But there are a few things that I've been wanting to ask you. Oh, you know you can come to me about anything, Iruka said to the boy. Naruto smiled a bit as he heard that. It was one of the few constancies in life that he could always turn to Iruka. Well, I was told I need a best man and I was hoping you would do it for me. He asked him, a little embarrassed to bring this up. Iruka blinked and then smiled at the boy. Naruto, it would be my honor. I'm surprised you didn't ask anyone else though. Sasuke said. No, Naruto muttered. He had asked him earlier in the week, but the boy was being a pain lately. Plus, if you couldn't do it, I was going to ask Fuzzy Brows next. Bushy Brows? Iruka asked, confused. Lee. Naruto clarified. Next to Sasuke, it was Lee he felt he could relate to the most. Sure, the guy was a little weird, but he liked him. He worked hard in life and Naruto could respect that. Well, then I'm glad you asked me. Iruka told him. So what's the second part? Can you help me with understanding something? I mean, I could use some advice, Naruto said, blushing at this point. After he learned what consummate meant, he knew he would need to learn a bit more about. After all, he knew the basics, but honestly, what were you supposed to do with a girl beyond that? Was there anything important he should do or not do? There were so many things he didn't know about it. Well, what's the subject? Iruka knew that Naruto had problems with paying attention in class. It had been a struggle to keep him seated and paying attention all those years. But the boy had turned out really well since he left, but if there was anything he could do to help, then he would. After all, that's why he became a teacher to begin with.